Let us explain blood flow in the heart. Before we do so, you should be able to name the 4 chambers of the heart. You should be able to identify where the 4 chambers of the heart are in looking at a diagram of the heart. You should also understand that the right side of the heart contains deoxygenated blood and the left side of the heart contains oxygenated blood. We have also looked at the fact that the heart consists of 2 pumps, and this means the same blood will flow through the heart twice before it exits the heart. We will start at the right atrium, and as I go through each slide, you're to ensure to pause the video to take down the notes that you hear as well as see on the screen. We are looking at the vena cava, which is this vessel, this blood vessel attached to the heart. The vena cava is attached to the right atrium of the heart. We say that the vena cava will bring deoxygenated blood from the body to the heart via the right atrium. So we have deoxygenated blood entering the right atrium. The right atrium, which is going to collect that deoxygenated blood, it is going to squeeze or contract, and in doing so, it sends the blood to the right ventricle. And so I'm going to trace the pathway to show how the blood flows. So we've entered into our right atrium. It's going to squeeze and send blood to the right ventricle. The right ventricle, which is here, is then going to pump this deoxygenated blood out of the heart to the lungs. So we're looking at the pathway it takes, right? So this blood will pump out of the heart and head to the lungs. The deoxygenated blood, which arrives at the lungs, is going to gain oxygen gas, and from the lungs it must now return to the heart. Let's look at how this deoxygenated blood left the heart and got to the lungs, and then how it returns from the lungs back to the heart. We say that this deoxygenated blood is pumped when the right ventricle squeezes, so it's squeezing blood out, and the vessel through which this deoxygenated blood leaves the right ventricle and goes to the lungs. These vessels are called pulmonary arteries. Right, so these are our pulmonary arteries which lead to the lungs. We're taking a look at our diagram here, which shows how deoxygenated blood enters via the vena cava to the right atrium of the heart. From the right atrium, the blood is sent into the right ventricle. The right ventricle squeezes and pushes the deoxygenated blood to the lungs via the pulmonary artery. And at the lungs, this deoxygenated blood will gain oxygen gas. This oxygenated blood must now return to the heart. It does so through vessels called pulmonary veins. These pulmonary veins, we say, take oxygenated blood from the lungs and it enters to the heart through the left atrium. So I want to label once again so we can see the chambers of the heart. So we have right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle, left ventricle. Right, so we see oxygenated blood returning from the lungs into the left atrium. The left atrium will then squeeze and send this blood to the left ventricle. Right, so our left atrium will squeeze, send blood to the left ventricle. The left ventricle will then squeeze and pump this oxygenated blood to the rest of the body, and it does so through a vessel, and I'm looking at the red colored vessel here. This vessel is what we call the aorta. Right, so this is the aorta. So we have blood being pumped out of the left ventricle through this red vessel, and this is called the aorta. So blood is pumped out of the left ventricle to the rest of the body. This oxygenated blood is pumped out through the aorta. Here is an animated picture which shows blood being pumped into the left side of the heart through the left atrium, down into the left ventricle, and out of the heart through the aorta. So we've seen the left side and the right side of the heart. We've identified some vessels. Let's now go through the different chambers and the blood vessels in the heart once more and identify what these are. Here we have the vena cava. We say that deoxygenated blood enters into the heart via the vena cava and into the right atrium. The right atrium will squeeze and send this deoxygenated blood into the right ventricle. The right ventricle contracts and sends the deoxygenated blood to the lungs via what is called the pulmonary arteries. The deoxygenated blood at the lungs collects oxygen gas, returns to the heart via vessels called pulmonary veins. Right, these are our pulmonary veins in yellow. The oxygenated blood enters into the heart through the left atrium. The left atrium contracts, sends the blood into the left ventricle. The left ventricle will contract, send blood out of the heart through the aorta. This blood will proceed to the rest of the body. And this is blood flow through the heart, naming the accompanying vessels. I have mentioned the vessels attached to the heart, the chambers of the heart. I must also mention how do we separate the right and the left of the heart, or what separates this deoxygenated blood from the oxygenated blood. And this is what we call a septum. So the septum separates the left and the right of the heart, and you're going to see it's a little muscular wall here, and it's separating the left from the right of the heart. You have to take note of a definition of what the septum is. And before I end off, there's just a short note, once again re-emphasizing where deoxygenated blood is found in the heart and where oxygenated blood is found, where this blood goes in the heart, and where, when it leaves the heart, where it goes as well. Right, so you have to take down this short note about the heart, and this is my video on the structure of the heart, not mentioning the valves, which we're going to look at later on. And just to summarize, in this video, we looked at the chambers of the heart, the blood vessels attached to the heart, and what type of blood flows through these chambers and the associated blood vessels.